In the early days of Kievan Rus, long before modern coins were common, people used different things for trade. This was a land of flowing rivers and busy trade routes. Merchants traveled from Scandinavia to the Byzantine Empire, and they needed a way to measure value. For a long time, the main form of currency was not a coin at all. It was a silver ingot called a hryvnia. These were not round and flat like the coins we know. They were long, often hexagonal or boat-shaped bars of silver. Their value was based on their weight and the purity of the silver. These ingots were heavy and valuable, used for very large transactions like buying land or paying tribute. The name Hryvnia itself has deep historical roots. It comes from an old Slavic word for a necklace or torque worn around the neck. These were often made of precious metals like silver or gold. It is believed that the metal bars used for trade eventually took on this name. Imagine a powerful prince paying his army or a wealthy merchant buying a shipment of furs. He wouldn't be counting out small coins, he would be weighing heavy silver hryvnias. This system worked well for the elite and for large-scale commerce that defined the economic power of Kievan Rus. It was a practical solution in an era before widespread standardized minting. Alongside the heavy silver ingots, foreign coins were also very important. Kievan Rus was a crossroads of cultures and economies. Because of this, coins from other lands flowed into its markets. Arab dirhams, silver coins from the Abbasid and Samanid caliphates, were extremely common. These coins were valued for their high-quality silver. They arrived in huge numbers through trade routes that crossed the Caspian and Black Seas. People in Kievan Rus often didn't care about the ruler pictured on the coin. They cared about the weight and the silver content. Many of these dirhams have been found in hoards across Ukraine, showing how widespread their use was. These foreign coins, especially the dirhams, served as a kind of small change. While a hryvnia ingot might buy a whole village, a dirham could be used for smaller everyday purchases. Sometimes these coins were cut into smaller pieces to make even finer change. This shows a developing and sophisticated economy. People needed different denominations for different kinds of trade. The combination of local silver ingots for large payments and foreign coins for smaller ones created a complex monetary system. This system was perfectly suited to the needs of the vibrant and far-reaching trade network of Kievan Rus, setting the stage for its own coinage to emerge. The late 10th and early 11th centuries were a golden age for Kievan Rus. Under the rule of Grand Prince Vladimir the Great, a major change happened. Vladimir wanted to show the power and sovereignty of his state. One of the best ways for a ruler to do this is to mint their own coins. Inspired by the gold coins of the Byzantine Empire, Vladimir issued the first coins of Kievan Rus. These were called zlotniks, meaning golden ones. These coins were not just for trade. They were powerful symbols of political and religious identity. They showed that Kievan Rus was a major European power, equal to its neighbors. The design of the zlotnik was very significant. On one side, it featured a portrait of Vladimir the Great sitting on a throne. This was a clear statement of his authority as the ruler. On the other side was an image of Jesus Christ, similar to Byzantine coins. This was important because Vladimir had recently converted Kievan Rus to Christianity. The coins were a way to spread this new faith and connect his rule with divine approval. He also included the trident symbol, or trizub, which was his personal emblem. This symbol is now the coat of arms of modern Ukraine, showing a direct link to this historic period of independence and power. In addition to the rare gold zlotniks, silver coins were also minted. These were called hryvnianiks, meaning silver ones. They were much more common than the gold coins and were used more for actual trade. The hryvnianiks also carried powerful imagery. Like the zlotniks, they featured a portrait of the ruling prince, such as Vladimir or his son Yaroslav the Wise. They also prominently displayed the trizub symbol. The minting of these silver coins showed that Kievan Rus had a stable economy and the technical skill to produce its own currency. It reduced the reliance on foreign silver coins like Arab dirhams. However, this period of local coinage did not last long. After the death of Yaroslav the Wise, Kievan Rus began to break apart into smaller, competing principalities. This political fragmentation led to the end of centralized coin minting. The production of zlotniks and hryvnianiks stopped completely by the middle of the 11th century. For the next several centuries, the lands of Ukraine entered a coinless period. People went back to using silver ingots, hryvnias, and foreign coins for trade. The brief but brilliant era of the first Ukrainian coins ended, but they left a lasting legacy of sovereignty and identity. The 13th century brought a catastrophic event that changed the course of history in Eastern Europe. The Mongol invasion swept across the lands of Kievan Rus. Cities were destroyed, trade routes were disrupted, and the political structure was shattered. This had a huge impact on the monetary system. The centralized power that had once minted the zlotniks and sriblianiks was gone. Local minting of coins ceased almost entirely for a long time. The economy was thrown into chaos. People buried their valuables in hoards, many of which have been discovered by archaeologists. These hoards often contain Hryvnia ingots and foreign coins, frozen in time at the moment of the invasion. With the collapse of local authority, the lands of Ukraine became a patchwork of different influences. The Golden Horde, the western part of the Mongol Empire, established control over much of the region. The Mongols were skilled administrators and understood the importance of trade and taxes. They began to mint their own coins, which circulated widely in the Ukrainian lands. These coins were often silver and featured inscriptions in Arabic script. They were a constant reminder of who was now in power. The economy slowly stabilized under Mongol rule, but it was a system based on foreign currency, not a local one. The political fragmentation meant that there was no single currency. In the western parts of Ukraine, which had more contact with Europe, other coins began to appear. The Genoese, who had trading colonies in Crimea, minted their own coins that were used in the south. These coins often featured Latin inscriptions and Christian symbols, showing a different sphere of influence. In the markets of cities like Lviv or Kyiv, you might find a mix of Golden Horde coins, Genoese coins, and perhaps some older Byzantine or Arab coins. This diversity of coinage reflected the fragmented political reality of the time. This period was defined by a lack of a unified Ukrainian monetary identity. The memory of the Sriblianiks of Volodymyr the Great had faded. The primary forms of money were now the silver Hryvnia ingots for large transactions and the assorted coins of foreign powers for everything else. This reliance on external currencies would become a recurring theme in Ukrainian history. The Mongol invasion did not just destroy cities. It also fractured the economic and monetary unity of Kievan Rus. It created a complex and diverse circulation of money that mirrored the political divisions of the land. As the power of the Golden Horde began to weaken in the 14th and 15th centuries, new powers moved in to fill the vacuum. The western and northern lands of modern-day Ukraine were gradually incorporated into the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which later united with Poland to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This political shift brought a major change to the monetary system. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had a well-developed economy and minted its own coins. Polish gross and Lithuanian denarii began to circulate widely, replacing the coins of the Golden Horde in these territories. This was a clear sign of the shifting political allegiances in the region. The coins of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth were different from what people were used to. They were based on European standards and featured portraits of Polish kings and Lithuanian dukes, along with their coats of arms. For the people living in cities like Lviv, Kyiv, and Lutsk, using these coins became a part of daily life. The mints in cities like Vilnius and Krakow produced huge quantities of silver coins that flowed into the Ukrainian lands. This period saw the gradual Europeanization of the monetary system in western and central Ukraine. The old Hryvnia ingots finally fell out of use as standardized mass-produced coins became common for both large and small transactions. Meanwhile, the southern parts of Ukraine, especially the coastal regions and Crimea, fell under the influence of another great power, the Ottoman Empire and its vassal, the Crimean Khanate. This created a separate monetary zone. Here, Ottoman coins like the silver akçe and the gold sultani were the main currency. These coins, with their elegant Arabic calligraphy and the tugra, the Sultan's official monogram, were very different from the Polish-Lithuanian coins used to the north. The economy in the south was oriented towards the Black Sea and the vast Ottoman market. Trade in grain, slaves, and other goods was conducted using Ottoman currency. This division created a fascinating monetary landscape in Ukraine. A person traveling from Lviv in the west to Kaffa, modern Feodosia, in the south, would have to exchange their coins multiple times. They would start with Polish gross, perhaps use some Hungarian ducats along the way, and finally need Ottoman akçes to do business in Crimea. This monetary divide reflected the deep political and cultural split in the Ukrainian lands. The north and west were drawn into the orbit of Catholic Central Europe, while the south was part of the Islamic Ottoman world. The coins in a person's pocket were a clear indicator of which empire held sway over their region. So, starting in the 17th century, another powerful empire began to expand its influence over Ukraine, and that was the Russian Empire. After the Khmelnytsky Uprising and the Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654, the eastern and central parts of Ukraine, known as the Hetmanate, came under Russian protection. Initially, the region maintained some autonomy, including its monetary system. Polish and other foreign coins continued to circulate, However, as the Russian Empire grew stronger, it began to impose its own systems. Peter the Great introduced major currency reforms, creating the Russian ruble, which was divided into 100 kopecks. This was actually one of the first decimal currency systems in the world. Over the course of the 18th century, the Russian ruble gradually replaced all other currencies in eastern and central Ukraine. The autonomy of the Hetmanate was slowly eroded, and by the reign of Catherine the Great, it was fully absorbed into the Russian Empire. This political integration was mirrored by monetary integration. Russian mints in Moscow and St. Petersburg produced vast quantities of silver and copper coins. These coins featured the portrait of the Russian Tsar or Tsarina and the double-headed eagle, the symbol of the Russian Empire. Using these coins was a daily reminder of being a subject of the Tsar. The introduction of the ruble brought standardization and stability to the economy. A unified currency made trade across the vast empire much easier. For merchants in Kiev or Kharkiv, it was now simple to do business with partners in Moscow or the Ural Mountains. The old, confusing system of different foreign coins was gone. However, this standardization came at a cost. It erased a part of Ukraine's distinct economic identity. The coins no longer carried any local symbols. They were purely Russian, designed to promote a sense of a single, unified imperial nation under the rule of the Tsar. This process of Russification through currency was a deliberate policy. By making the ruble the only legal tender, the empire weakened regional ties and strengthened the connection to the center of power in St. Petersburg. The production of coins was a state monopoly, and it was used as a tool of political control. For generations of Ukrainians living in the Russian Empire, the only coins they ever knew were Russian kopecks and rubles. The memory of a separate Ukrainian currency, like the Hryvnia of Kievan Rus, was lost to all but a few historians. The ruble became the dominant currency, a symbol of imperial rule that would last until the collapse of the empire in 1917. While eastern Ukraine was being absorbed into the Russian Empire, the western regions had a very different experience. Territories like Galicia, Bukovina, and Zakarpattia came under the control of the Habsburg monarchy, which later became the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Just as Russia imposed the ruble in the east, the Habsburgs imposed their own currency in the west. For much of the 19th century, the currency was the florin or gulden. Later, in 1892, the empire introduced a new gold standard currency called the kron, or korona in Ukrainian. This became the official money for Ukrainians living under Habsburg rule. The Austro-Hungarian krona was a modern European currency. The coins were minted in Vienna and other imperial cities. They featured the portrait of the emperor, Franz Joseph I, and the double-headed eagle of the Habsburgs. The inscriptions on the coins were in Latin or German. However, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a multi-ethnic state, and it allowed for some degree of cultural expression. For example, banknotes were often printed with multiple languages, including a form of Ukrainian, then called Ruthenian. This was a small but important recognition of the different nationalities within the empire. Life in cities like Lviv, then called Lemberg, and Chernivtsi, then called Chernovitz, was tied to the economy of Vienna and Budapest. The kron was the medium for all transactions, from buying bread at the market to paying taxes to the imperial government. This created a different economic and cultural orientation compared to the parts of Ukraine under Russian rule. While Ukrainians in Kyiv were using rubles and looking towards Moscow, Ukrainians in Lviv were using kronen and looking towards Vienna. The two parts of the Ukrainian nation were developing along separate economic and political tracks, divided by an imperial border. This division had long-lasting consequences. The experience under Austro-Hungarian rule was generally seen as less repressive than under the Russian Empire. Ukrainians in Galicia were able to develop their own political parties, cultural societies, and press. This experience of civic life and relative autonomy would be very important later on. The currency was a key part of this separate identity. The use of the kron connected Western Ukrainians to Central Europe. its legal systems, and its economic habits. When the empires finally collapsed after World War I, the two parts of Ukraine had been separated by different currencies and political systems for over a century. After the chaos of World War I and the Ukrainian War of Independence, most of Ukraine was incorporated into the Soviet Union. This brought about another dramatic shift in currency. The young Ukrainian People's Republic had briefly tried to issue its own currency, the Karbovanets and even the Hryvnia, reviving the ancient name. However, this independence was short-lived. The Bolsheviks established control and made the Soviet ruble the single currency for the entire Union. From the 1920s until 1991, the Soviet ruble was the only legal money in Ukraine. All other currencies were eliminated. The Soviet ruble was more than just money. It was a powerful tool of ideology and central control. The coins and banknotes were completely uniform across all 15 Soviet republics, from Ukraine to Kazakhstan. The designs were meant to promote communist ideals. Coins featured the hammer and sickle, the symbol of the union of workers and peasants. They also had the inscription "Proletarians of all countries, unite," in the languages of the different republics on some issues. However, the dominant visual language was Russian, and the overall message was one of unity under the central government in Moscow. This unified currency system had a profound impact on Ukraine's monetary identity. For nearly 70 years, any notion of a separate Ukrainian currency was completely suppressed. Generations of people grew up knowing only the Soviet kopek and ruble. The designs on the money celebrated Soviet achievements, like the space program, or featured generic images of workers and farmers. There were no Ukrainian historical figures, no trizub, and no symbols of Ukrainian culture. This was a deliberate policy to create a new Soviet person and erase national distinctions. The money in people's pockets reinforced this message every single day. The Soviet economy was a command economy, not a market economy. The state controlled all prices and production. The ruble's value was set by the government, and it was not freely convertible into other currencies. This isolated the entire Soviet Union, including Ukraine, from the global financial system. The ruble system was a closed loop, designed to serve the needs of the centralized state. When the Soviet Union finally began to collapse in the late 1980s, this centrally controlled monetary system fell apart with it. Hyperinflation destroyed the value of the ruble, wiping out the savings of millions and paving the way for the re-emergence of national currencies. When Ukraine declared its independence from the collapsing Soviet Union in August 1991, one of the most urgent tasks was to create its own economic system. The old Soviet ruble was still in circulation, but it was suffering from massive inflation. The new Ukrainian government needed to protect its economy from this monetary chaos. The first step was to introduce a transitional currency. In January 1992, Ukraine launched the Karbovanets, also known as the coupon Karbovanets. This was not initially a full-fledged currency, but rather coupons that were issued alongside the ruble to control consumption. The Karbovanets had a difficult start. The early 1990s were a time of severe economic crisis in Ukraine. The country was trying to switch from a communist command economy to a free market system, and the process was painful. The government printed huge amounts of Karbovanets to pay wages and cover its expenses. This led to hyperinflation. Prices skyrocketed, and the value of the currency plummeted. People were carrying around huge stacks of banknotes to buy basic goods. It was a time of great hardship and uncertainty. The Karbovanets became a symbol of this difficult transition period. Despite the economic problems, the introduction of the Karbovanets was a crucial step towards sovereignty. It was the first time in decades that Ukraine had its own separate currency, distinct from Moscow. The banknotes, though often printed quickly and on low-quality paper, were a tangible symbol of independence. They marked a clear break from the Soviet past and the Russian-dominated monetary system. The Karbovanets was a temporary solution, a bridge between the old Soviet ruble and a new stable national currency. It was a necessary, though difficult, part of the journey to full economic independence. All through this turbulent period, work was underway to create a permanent national currency. The name chosen for this new currency was the Hryvnia, a powerful link back to the medieval Kievan Rus. This choice was highly symbolic. It was a declaration that modern Ukraine was the heir to that ancient and powerful state. The designs for the new coins and banknotes were carefully prepared, featuring prominent Ukrainian historical and cultural figures. The government waited for the economy to stabilize before introducing the new currency. The era of the Karbovanets, with all its difficulties, was paving the way for the birth of the modern Hryvnia. In September 1996, the long-awaited moment arrived. The Ukrainian government conducted a monetary reform, replacing the inflation-plagued Karbovanets with the new Hryvnia. The exchange was made at a rate of 100,000 Karbovanets to 1 Hryvnia. This was a major turning point for the young nation. The introduction of a stable and well-designed currency was a sign that the worst of the post-Soviet economic crisis was over. The Hryvnia was divided into 100 kopeki, creating a modern decimal system. For the first time in centuries, Ukraine had a truly sovereign and functional national currency. The design of the Hryvnia coins and banknotes is deeply connected to Ukrainian identity. The coins, called kopeki, are simple but elegant. They feature the Ukrainian coat of arms, the trizub, on one side. This is the same symbol used by Vladimir the Great on his Hryvniaks over 1,000 years ago. This creates a powerful and unbroken line of history, linking the modern state to its medieval origins. The use of the trizub on every coin is a daily reminder of Ukraine's long struggle for independence and its deep historical roots. It is a symbol of national pride that circulates in the hands of every citizen. The banknotes go even further in celebrating Ukrainian culture and history. Each denomination features a prominent figure from Ukraine's past. The 1 Hryvnia note shows Vladimir the Great, the Grand Prince of Kievan Rus. The 2 Hryvnia note features his son, Yaroslav the Wise. Other notes depict famous hetmans, poets, writers and philosophers like Bohdan Khmelnytsky, Ivan Mazepa, Taras Shevchenko, and Hryhorij Skovoroda. These are not just portraits. They are a statement about what and who is important to the Ukrainian nation. The currency acts as a kind of national history book, educating people about their heritage. Today, the Hryvnia is more than just a medium of exchange. It is a fundamental symbol of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and cultural identity. In the face of external aggression and challenges, the national currency has become a sign of resilience and national unity. The National Bank of Ukraine has issued commemorative coins that celebrate key moments in Ukrainian history, military victories, and cultural achievements. These coins serve as a form of national memory, solidifying the narrative of a proud and independent nation. The journey from the ancient silver ingots of Kievan Rus to the modern Hryvnia is a story of Ukraine itself, a long and often difficult path toward defining and defending